Ba-da-dum, ba-da-da, nerds. Da-da-dum, da-da-da, nerds. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-da, War of Nerds. Dum, da-da-dum, da-da, funky fantasy. Dum, 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 da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da, Otacon. Dum, dum, Stratoceros. Da-da-dum. Season finale. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the season finale episode for the War of Nerds podcast, season 2. Your bearded nerdy hosts, well, bearded and training, as well as the rest of us, are here to guide you through yet another wonderful episode. And today's topic choice is character creation. And we're going to talk about a lot of stuff that has to do with character creation, from how we create characters to some of our favorite characters created to other people's characters that they created that we don't hate and that we might like. It just really depends. So, gentlemen, my first question for you is, how do you create a character?
You got something, Caleb?
I just pull them out of thin air because I'm brilliant and magnificent and everything that I'm kidding. I do, but it's a long-winded explanation. So if anybody would like to go before me, please do so.
I'll throw something out there and then you can go into that. You may play off of it anyways. I definitely think I'm normally story first. I have an idea and then I see what characters fit into that story. And that's where I get my base idea for my character. But then as I'm going, I tend to build off of that character, where the story takes me, what that character would choose to do in that moment. But I usually have a good idea of who that character is once I plug them into the story and they start telling me the little details of their backstory. Oh, this makes sense in this scenario, and I build off of that. So, I mean, that's kind of where I start, and then I go into more detail from there.
It's and why so why do you go about it that way? Why story first and then characters? Is that just how your brain hole wants it, or is it uh, like process wise, like just easier for you?
For me, my stories are never specifically about one character. They're about a world, an event, and how that world and event affects those characters. So I usually come to the idea comes to me as a story, and I'm like, okay, here's what happens. Well, who would that happen to? So the story comes first, and then I'm like, okay, what makes the most sense for this story to impact someone? Is it going to impact them negatively, positively? What kind of person would it be affected by this? What kind of person would be the villain? What would be the hero? Or if is there even a hero? Are they all morally gray in that story? And then that gives me a base character. And then once I have that base character, then I'm like, okay, who is that person? And I start getting into the nitty gritty of what was their backstory? How did they grow up? Do they have parents? Do they have friends? Do they have siblings? Like, and some of that stuff comes later. Like in the series I'm currently writing, I have a character that has five sisters. And in the first book, I didn't know she had five sisters till I got to the point where we meet her family. And I'm like, there are five sisters. And this is how this family dynamic works. I knew she would have a sibling or two, but I didn't
Or
realize,
five.
yeah, or five.
Yeah.
And then
Surprise.
yeah. And there's a reason why there's five later on, but that had to come out of the story for me to get that detail. And she's not necessarily a main character in the first book, but one of, and then she becomes more important later in the series. So, like I said, for me, the story brings out a lot of the character details, but I still have a good idea of who that person is to start. And then their backstory comes in as it develops.
Because you see, we've talked about it before on the podcast about process of writing
Mhm.
and how we go about things. And it's like, for the majority, you, me, and Alfred, I know for a fact that a lot of it we know the beginning, the middle, and the end. Sometimes not even the middle, but we know the beginning and the end. How we get there is a question, and we're all a little bit different. But I know that for me, and especially with character creation and the process of it, has a lot to do with my style of being a pantser plotter.
Mhm.
So, I plot my overall storyline, and when I'm going through, like, for example, I knew I had an overarching villain for Kingdom Society. So, and I knew the name was going to be Malice. Like, that was just one of the first things that came to me. So it's like, all right, cool. Malice is the villain. All right. Who's the other characters? And so I kind of it's a building block game for me. I have to build all the pieces for the main characters' stories, the ones that are the most impactful. So I have to figure out how old they are, what's important about them, and even some things about them that are important are learned later in the story. But as character creation process goes, it depends on my mood too. If I'm in world building mode, then I'm creating elements of the universe, but not necessarily characters.
Mhm.
If I'm in character creation mode, I look at all the characters that I have. I look at their family lineage. I look at what their role is in the story, and then I start fleshing things out. And I even have a point to where I have a piece of paper in front of me in a journal, because when I'm doing character creation, I'm actually physically writing with a pencil and paper.
Yeah.
And I'll look and I'll see random names off to the side. I'm just like, okay, these names haven't been used yet. Do I want them for any of these, or are these just going to be randos, right? Or they might be a placeholder. Uh, for anybody who's read my book and is a listener, or even for others, I originally had Meridian's father, whose name is Arion Valoran. Well, his name was originally Harlem White, and when later on when I got through, I looked at that. I'm just like, that is literally the worst, just white bread, boring, basic name ever. Harlem White sounds like a Disney princess like cartoon. Like
Beware, I'm John Smith.
beware, Harlem is walking through shadows. He looks for you tonight. Anyways,
His
I just
last
looked at the
name's White.
as opposed to being charcoal.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it was just I saw that and immediately I was reading it out loud. I'm like, I don't like this anymore. This doesn't scream I'm a villain with a complex story that no one's going to understand until they do understand, and people are still going to hate him and not forgive him for what he did because his reasons were not actually good enough to be for what he did. In my, anyways, I just looked at it. I'm like, no. So I'm like, I just came up with another name, and I was just like, immediately, first time, I was just like, Arion. I'm like, I really like that name. I was thinking of my hero at the time, and the little girl Ari. And I was just like, she was really one of my favorite characters at that arc in the show. It's like, okay, it's like Ari. That wouldn't be. I don't like that for a guy, but I'm like thinking Game of Thrones. I'm just like, well, I was thinking Aegon Targaryen at that point in time. I was just like, Aegon, Ari, Arion. I was just like, I took like sounds of two different names, kind of formed them together into my own kind of like Arion. That would be the name of a guy. I'm like, all right, I need to have a good last name. So I was just like Viserion. And then some people were like, you might not want to do Viserion because that's a dragon name in Game of Thrones. And I'm just like,
Meh.
whatever, but okay. So I changed it from Viserion to Valoron. And I'm like, Arion Valoron. And that is the name of, could be a villain, could be a lordly king, could be many things. But so that's a kind of a process for character creation for me. And also creating names for them, sometimes random. Sometimes I look at road signs and I rearrange letters and I'm like, oh, cool. And sometimes I just name characters off of city names too. And it can actually be pretty cool that way, like legit. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else specifically. I'm like, a lot of my characters, like, they're built during the story, right? Like all their emotions, their tethers, their interactions, all that stuff gets built during the story as they go. So like you're like looking at a base model like Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story, right? You buy the toy, it's the base model, plastic, it's got the buttons that you push, and then like a year later, Buzz Lightyear's got like one cracked button, a chipped windshield. He's got like a sword hole through his like centerpiece, like your dog gnawed off. Like one of the fingers, like your sister painted like lipstick on the windshield and like a bunch of stuff. And now you're looking at like legendary Buzz Lightyear, like 10 plus, whatever. And that's kind of how I think about it with character creation too. They've been through the fires, they've been through the flames as you're writing, and you find out more things about them as the story progresses. So, anyways, that's my long-winded explanation. Caleb.
All right. So I could be completely off base with this. I'm just going to throw that out there. But
Wrong answer.
I
I'm just
am a
kidding.
little unhinged at times. Um, but let's get the easy stuff out of the way. Primarily everything starts with a question. Like on the Gambit, the project I'm working on now. Uh, the question was, what happened? What would a society look like if it advanced to short-range space travel without using fossil fuel? So that's how we get this kind of like steampunky um, treasure planet kind of vibe that I really I'm having so much fun with it. And when I get kind of a feel or a flavor for the overall world, I'll start to kind of get specifics for the regions. Uh, so the planet's name is Deimos, and it is a ringed planet with a bunch of different moons, and each moon's kind of like it suffers from Star Wars moon syndrome, where each moon is one specific climate. Um, it's a little bit better than that, but uh, it's specifically known for one reason. They're much smaller than the planet, so I mean you gotta make do. But after that, I start thinking of, okay, what would these people do? What would a normal job be, and what would something that would be awesome? So this is where we get to the main character, Nikolai, which is a reference to Nikola Tesla, and he is one of my friends runs an auto body shop and a salvage yard. It's like, okay, so him and his father, they run a salvage yard for ships. But this one's not. They're on the furthest moon away, so this one's kind of. They're allowed to skate by just because it'd be too expensive to enforce all the rules on them. So they have a bunch of junk parts. They have a bunch of junk machine pieces lying around. So and this kid, he grew up tinkering, and he doesn't know who his father is, and I'm not going to explain who his father is because that would ruin the whole book. Uh, but he starts tinkering and he starts learning and he starts building things that are extra legal, we shall say. They exist outside of legality. Uh, Now, to help me focus these characters, do you are you all familiar with? I almost hate to give them the publicity, but Magic the Gathering.
Yep.
Okay, are you familiar with the color pie, like in depth?
Yes.
I use the 5 color
Mhm.
system from Magic. For example, Nikola is he's a red blue.
Okay.
His personality is summed up as a red blue, and further on through the story, we'll see him add a little bit of white influence, and then we'll see him add a little bit of black influence. And for everybody who doesn't know what that means, uh the way Magic works is it's like Hearthstone. You have a mana cost to play your cards. Your cards cost resources or money to play if you want to use that. However, this money is divided into certain kind of denominations. You have white mana pays for, you know, cards that cost a white cost, and so on and so forth. And each one represents a set of ideals. Red is all about passion and freedom and getting yourself out there. It's very brash, it's very reckless, and it can be prone to bouts of anger and change for the sake of change.
Mhm.
Blue is very much the opposite of that. Blue is very much disciplined. I want to study, I want to learn, I want to be able to manipulate, I have to know it all, and it can be very cold and distant. So the two working together, you get this kind of theme of constant iterative improvement. You're always improving for the sake of being better than you were yesterday, for being the most free, you have to learn the most stuff. And it's very so his goal is to be out from under the boot of whatever boot he just happens to be under.
Mhm.
But in order to do that, he will use his sometimes reckless but very creative thought process to get through. And I've got a list of those for all the characters I have fleshed out so far. Like the quartermaster, he is white. I'm sorry, white blue, white black red, and that we can go on and on about that. But that's and I can't take full credit for that. I stumbled upon that idea years ago. I think the YouTube channel is Dice Try. He does it for D&D characters. I was like, ooh, I think I can use that.
Mhm.
So that's about that's how I at least keep them. That might not be how I initially create them, but that's how I mold them and keep them focused. And from there on, so long as it makes sense to their identity or it makes sense for the plot, they will shift and change and grow, and I'll just add or remove colors.
I think that's a really unique and cool system, and I think that speaks to how every author is a little different about how they create their characters. And then going beyond just creating the characters you're talking about, as you're going through the plot, the character's true to themselves. They're not going wildly off what that character originally was. Because if you have a
Mhm.
character that's super shy and not outgoing, and then all of a sudden they're doing these things that are extremely out of their character, and then they come right back into that shell, and you have no explanation for why they were able to come out of that shy shell and then do whatever and then retract it again, it breaks the mold of what that character was. So that's a really good system for like checks and balances, making sure that holds through the plot. Because I think character development is something we'll have to talk about in this episode. But if your character doesn't grow during your story, then they haven't served a purpose in it, especially if they are one of the point of views of your story. There has to be some sort of growth, and it can be a very small amount of growth, but there has to be growth in that character when they're the point of view. Otherwise, from the beginning to the end, if there's no change in that character, what did they go through and why did they go through it? In my opinion.
Beginning to end, follow Tommy as he buys more than one Whopper Jr. from different Burger Kings around the country. But here's the thing, Bobby's allergic to onions. So when he eats different onions, he gains different allergic reactions, which turn into toxic waste dumps on his body. Each button turns into a radioactive dislocative bomb. And as he drops these, it turns insects into hordes of swarming hornets that turn species into dead, undead, rebirth zombies. So moral of the story is Tommy
Don't eat
just
onions.
don't eat onions. Or that's
It's a good theme.
yeah, I would read that book of just literally for the fact to find out like what's gonna have a book so bad with character development so awful that you literally just want to read it to find out what actually happens with these characters. Like it's so bad that you want to keep reading. I don't know if
Isn't
any
that
of you
called the
guys.
news?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, actually, that actually is the number one prime example. Dun 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 dun. Hello and welcome to World News Live. Tonight we've got an exciting development of a man who's been hunting down wolves in the backyard of his hut, as long as well of a bunch of snakes as well. We'll have more updates for you. Also, Steve Irwin is going live snake hunting if you want to follow along on the channel. This has been Kentucky Fried Bob. Thank you.
Brought to you by all these multi-billion-dollar corporations.
Yep.
Brought to you by Goofy here. Anyways, so
Ooh, gotta be careful with that one.
yup, sure do. So anyways,
Oh no!
the next question for character creation process is do we what
I got one if you're thinking.
Yeah, no, hit it, Ryan. Go ahead.
All right. So for you guys, I know it differs for each author, but when you're doing like the details of your character, what they look like, what they wear, things like that, do you go deep into detail, or are you an author who builds their personality but kind of leaves their personal effects open so that the character can relate and put themselves in that shoe? What is your approach when it comes to that?
That's a great question. You want me to go first, Caleb, or
It doesn't matter to me. Whoever.
all right, well, I guess we'll just keep it going in the same order, then I'll hit it. So when I first create a character, I know like basic characteristics of them. Tall, short, fat, jumbo, skinny, crackhead, deathly ill, a step away from the grave, whatever they're going to look like, hollowed out jaws, long neck, skin, whatever. Basic characteristics of what they're going to look like. Like dude looks like Mundi, but he's got like a beer gut and like dad arms, without the super tall head. But I basically, red hair, color of their eyes. That's really it. Like physique, hair color, eye color, and everything else. I really kind of just let it go, and I don't really think about specifics like because well, I don't write romance either, so I feel like for the romance people, they're just like, she caressed his very perfect perpendicular jaw against his no facial hair as the mustache curled up on the side of his chin, right where his goosebumps would stand. Like, I just don't think about all those like individual details. I'm like, character has red hair, character has blue eyes, character's tall, character's buff. Enough said. Readers can determine what they like. In my eyes, like inside my brain, I have an idea of what like if I was going to shake my character's hand, I could imagine what they look like. Um, and as I'm writing and I'm going through like the action in my head, I'm just like, I know what they look like to me, but I want other people to like just come up with their own like thoughts of what they think characters look like. Because my second book, I had a character be like, oh yeah, this reminds me of you know, Kazuma from Tekken, blah blah blah, or this guy reminds me of Ramirez from Highlander, or it reminds me of Vegeta, or it reminds me of whatever. I'm like, really? That's what he reminds you of? I'm like, I'm totally thinking like a mix of like crocodile with like cowboy boots. But all right,
Crocodile and cowboy.
I'm just saying,
And you got Vegeta.
exactly. So it's like Vegeta, but if he was wearing like a suit and tie and uh was more sarcastic on the line of like Luffy. And actually I don't think Luffy knows how to be sarcastic. Anyways, so that's kind of yeah, I mean really like looks wise, like yeah, I know in my head. Um that's a good question. How about you, Caleb?
I think the exact opposite. I know everything, at least the core cast. I know everything about the core cast. Um, like for example, there's uh, if you've played Zelda, you're familiar with the Rito, and there is a species similar to the Rito, and there's one on the ship. His name is Mercutio. He is the uh kind of the resident bard, if you will. He's a historian. He's very much into archaeology and histories, and he met up with this crew because basically they were the best ticket to uncovering the secrets of the past that have been forgotten. But he is about 5'4". He's very light. He's got a broken beak and kind of like one of those prosthetics you see on some of the eagles and what do you call them, the birds of prey sanctuaries, because his culture, they pride themselves and their hierarchies based on how beautiful your plumage is. His is very plain, at least at first glance. It's very, very white, very gray. But if you get up and you look at it very closely, you see there are a lot of very fine silver lines, just making an intricate, rather beautiful pattern on his body. But nobody took the time to just really notice them. But he loves he loves entertaining people. He's his favorite food is cherry pie. I've got a list of things that he is that helps make up him. And will that make it in the book? Probably not. Most of that will if I do like tidbits at the end or just extra lore dumps later on, that's where that'll come in handy. But it really is just for me, so I know the character.
So you
Yeah,
know, like literally, like every nook and cranny of their bodies, you know exactly
I mean,
what they look like.
I don't know how many armpit hairs Mercutio has. I don't
Hey,
know.
you should, right? I mean, no, I'm just kidding. Like, my character has exactly 140 armpit hairs divided by two.
Like
dang.
I have not put that much thought into it, but I know everything else about them. Like I know his usual style of dress is a pair of shorts and two straps that crisscross, I guess belts really. Two belts that crisscross on his chest. He's a grenadier. He
Mm.
flies and he drops basically just drops bombs on people. He also has a light backpack that has a small bow in it when he does run out of grenades. But yeah, he's just all over the place. He prefers to be up on deck where he can fly. Usually you find him in the crow's nest, which of course probably that's stereotypical. Uh, but he's I don't know. He's just really lighthearted, very fun loving, kind of bumbling sometimes. But you will not find anyone more stout hearted when the chips are down.
I like
Nice.
it.
And that leaves it to you, Ryan.
So I think there's two schools of thought on this I'll talk about, and then I'll talk about what I kind of do. The first school of thought is say your character walks into a bar and they see the most beautiful woman they've ever seen. Any reader is going to read that line and imagine a different woman than I would
Yeah.
see, or Kayla would see, or Nathan would see. So in moments like that, when you use such a loose description, you give the chance for the reader to paint the picture. Whereas if I say she looks exactly like this with straight black hair, she's very thin, someone's gonna be like, well, that's not what I would consider beautiful. And all of a sudden, what you want to come across in that scene as being very desirable takes them out of that scene because it isn't to them. Now, when it comes to my characters, there are specific things I do describe because I feel like it's necessary to who they are. Like when you were talking about Marcuccio, which as soon as you said, sorry for the pronunciation there,
Oh
as
yeah,
soon
no,
as
you're
you
fine.
said his name, I immediately thought Bard because that name carries that
Yeah,
stigma
yeah.
along with it. Um, and there are certain things, if it's a alien race or if you've created a world of people who have a certain type because of the climate or where they live, that they have these certain traits, those have to be described, and
Mhm.
that has to fit the character too. So how would they be inside of their alien race using their abilities? And I like the descriptions you have for that character. When we get to like human characters, if they're from a tropical island, they're not going to be the palest of pale. And
No,
like you may come
Nikolai is his
across,
Wait,
name.
yeah, so you
are
may
you telling
mention
me
that.
that they're not going to look like somebody from the Eastern Alps who is
And
always out in the Sanja? And like, just not.
they could, if you're like, that could be their characteristic. They cannot tan, like they don't burn, they don't tan. For some reason, their characteristic as a character is they are pale despite the climate they come from. That could be a character that is their thing, and there's a reason behind that, whether it's something inside of them that's magical that protects them from that sun or doesn't allow them to absorb anything, something like that would be tied to the character. But I do think for my characters, I'll give brief descriptions. They have brown hair, they are muscular. Some of them I'll go in more detail because I feel like that character has a very specific look. Like Nathan was talking about the redhead, that's a family lineage, they're all redheads. That makes sense to me. But for the most part, I do a loose generation thing where it could be kind of fit anything look wise. I won't say it's a square jawline. I won't say they have a round face unless that fits the character and explains who they are, where you have those stereotypes. But that's where we fall into those stereotypes. If you have that round face and these goofy character, then you're just feeding into that stereotype, which you can if that's what you want to get across. But then you have that balance of, are you relying just on those tropes, or are you building a character that kind of breaks that mold and stands on their own? So, like I said, there's a little bit of a balance between those two, but if you get too descriptive, you lock yourself into a stereotype people have for that character to begin with.
It's
I
like
don't.
you have your mother's eyes kind of thing.
I love that. That's
Yep.
perfect. I don't like J.K. Rowling is actually great with her descriptions in Harry Potter. Like it's
I
not,
agree.
Credit where it's due. I
Mhm.
I believe you are. I believe that's fair.
Mhm.
you know, I'm not getting beat over the head. Lord of the Rings was another one where the descriptions were like good for the characters. It wasn't overabundance for character
It
descriptions.
was everything
Other
else.
descriptions for other stuff
It
is
was
a
everything else.
whole nother thing. We're not going into like that. But like for me, I like to be like, you know, he ran a hand through his flaming red hair, his
Mhm.
long flaming red hair. Or, you know, he looked at the reflection and his, you know, bluish green eyes, ocean blue eyes looked back at him. You know, things like that. Or if he's taller than his sister, he looked down at her. Hey, guess what? Shocker. He's taller than her because he's
Yeah.
looking down at her. Or, you know,
Absolutely.
they looked up at the old wizard who had silver and anyway, so you know, if there's a character where you need to have more descriptions because it's important to their lore, to who they are as a character, they're that important to the story, sweet, go
Mhm.
ahead. Otherwise, I would rather come up with my own ideas. Give me basic things. Oh, and they're just like, well, why didn't you have more descriptors about what they were wearing? I don't know, gee, because it had nothing to do with what was going on in the story.
At
Like,
best, a passing, a
it
passing.
said,
He wore jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Is
So-
Cedric Bombibly walked out the front door on a wonderful BBC and looked up at the sun. His purplish velvet cloak's long sleeve walked down as the tunic's wrapped around his forearms, the buff showing his large muscles, as the creases in his shirt straight down to his black belt wrapped around him with the eagle's pin on his chest, and he wore the top hat that went around as it streamed his beard up and over. That, like,
See, I already
I was
forgot
just
like your first description of that character.
Cedric
see
Bumba
my point.
Bumba.
You don't even remember the character's name. And it's just like,
No.
first of all, Cedric Bumbule walked out the front
Bumbule.
door and immediately he looked up at the sun. Why are we talking about him looking at the sun if you're talking about his stupid purple sleeves? What do purple sleeves and sun have to do? The sun reflected off of his purple sleeves as I went down. Creases filled with the black belt, as well, and the shoes were also black, and the pants were also black. Like, okay, great. If the pants and the shirt and the shoes and everything being black is important to the story, like unless it's like they're at a funeral and you're writing like low fantasy or like modern day historical fiction, guess what? People wear black when they go to funerals. I don't need to know that he had black everything. Just
Yep.
he wore black attire. Boom, there you go. You're simplifying things. It doesn't matter. They're just like, well, I mean, what kind of gold lacings were like wrapped in that? There's a family like sigil that it doesn't matter. If I'm not writing about it in the said scene, it does not matter at that point in time. I'm going to write what is relevant and pertinent for each scene. And that's why reading it again and going over and over individual parts. And that's all about what character creation is. Because guess what? If you give everything about your character away at the beginning,
Yeah, you have to sprinkle it.
yeah, you sprinkle it like just like that the stupid YouTube meme or whatever. It was like,
Salt.
oh yeah, sprinkle it. But you know, like that could be a voice clip right there. But
Oh,
anyways,
no.
it'd be way better than the current traveling one that's going around. Anyways, anybody who's watching, you can guess which one that is.
Mhm.
Anywho, it's 2024. So when you watch this a year from now, you'll know exactly what the is. So the I don't believe in giving everything away about a character immediately because it's called an unreliable MC is the specific term for it. If you write unreliable MC characters, your readers learn about the character as the character learns about the world as you go. So that's like Harry Potter learning about the magic community, having grown up with muggles. Harry Potter is an unreliable MC. He doesn't know about the wizarding world. So you're learning about Harry as he learns about the wizarding world as it goes through the story. That's an unreliable character. And you don't learn everything about Harry right away. He's the boy who lived, a lightning scar, black hair that's messy and can't, like, he cut it, but it stays short, glasses, skinny, green eyes. There you go. Boom. Like descriptors done and over. Do we need to know exactly what belt size he wears or like exactly what his attire is for that day? Unless you're talking about like the robes for Hogwarts, like, sure, tell me what they look like because it has a pertinent reason to be known. Hagrid taking Harry down Diagon Alley. You kind of need to know some of the stuff that's going on around them. That's what makes that scene so lively. All it is Hagrid taking Harry shopping. Literally, in any circumstances other than that, would be boring. Everybody hates shopping. Literally everybody. Nobody wants to be around people.
But this is magic shopping.
Yes, but still, it would be really boring if it's
Hey,
just Harry being like,
it's
wow.
magic shopping with Hagrid.
Exactly.
You know how many people
There
I
you
would
go.
murder to go magical shopping with Hagrid? At least one.
One? Just one?
Yeah, the boy
I
who
said at
lived.
Come on,
least.
man.
That's the floor. That's
You're
the.
selling yourself short. You gotta
I mean,
be more.
I mean, I do have a box full of things over there. I
I
could.
will tackle. I will tackle an elementary football team lightly and politely to take away the opportunity from
Sorry.
going like Hagrid, Hagrid, Hagrid.
Out of
No,
my way.
you shall not pass. Anyways,
But I will.
I would never actually do that. But here, so third question about character creation. So we've
Okay.
talked about the basics, how we start the characters, what we know about the characters, what we think is important to show and tell to the audience. Now, after you've done the basics and you added the character, what do you believe is the most important final step of a character's creation before they are implemented in the story? And how do you know where to implement them in the story for side characters? We're going to talk about side characters and supporting cast here. So main characters aside, you already know what you need for them. So how do you know what makes you determine when that character is ready, when they show up, or do you just end up pantsing in your random characters and you learn about them as the main characters learn about them?
Uh, it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So I kind of just let the character, so long as they don't go stray too far outside of their core principles without some major event happening. Uh, I just kind of let them grow as the story grows. However, for the side characters, when I know they're ready to be implemented into the story, is when I know what they fear the most, what they want the most, and how much they are willing to sacrifice to either avoid or obtain those two things.
Are they willing to sacrifice a Whopper Jr. with onions?
Ooh, the onions, yes, but the Whopper Jr. probably not.
This is fair and adequate. Ryan, how about you?
Uh, so actually this brings me to a dilemma I came across in my book 3. I was getting rid of a character in book 2, not necessarily writing them out, but taking them away from the story. And then gonna bring them back in later. I created a character to come in book 3 that was gonna be similar to that character. And when I re-looked at it, I was like, why am I creating another character that's going to be almost a carbon copy of this character when the same character can come back and it makes sense and fill the same role? So instead of George R. Martin and adding more characters
Oh.
unnecessarily, I brought in the same character back and made it make sense for the story. And again, that's when the story's developing. You start to see, okay, I need someone to come into the scene and either be the antagonist, the protagonist, or just be a supportive character to what's going on. Who is going to fill that role best? Do I need to create a new character to fill that role because I need a different dynamic? Or would one of my existing characters come back in? Because for my first book, some people have told me that their favorite scene is a side character that comes in, does a little like street show, and then disappears. And that's their favorite character in the entire book. He's in one chapter, has one scene, and never appears again. And I'm like, wait, that's your favorite character? And they're like, yeah, I loved all your other ones, but I really liked what he did. I want to see more of that. So I need to write an entire book about street magic, I guess. But like, I was like, that character is not going to come back. But now I'm like, okay, people like this. Is it a recurring character that if say they go back to that city, they've had a relationship with this character, could come back in and play a role later on, but he's not a main cast character for me as an author. So I think the story kind of tells me when I need to bring somebody in, and then I have to decide what their role is. Like Caleb said earlier, you ask these questions, and those questions direct you kind of where your characters are and what they need to bring to that scene and if they're going to fit.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I brought characters in and I'm like, this doesn't fit. I need to change this because I need a different dynamic. So
Yeah. Yeah, and that the street performer was pretty cool, I'll just
okay.
say. Like,
Yeah.
so
Glad you
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, for me with side characters and supporting cast, the majority of supporting cast, I know when they're gonna come in because I know at least one scene where they're relevant.
Mhm.
But for a lot of side characters, I'm just like, characters are walking along down the road. Bum bum ba da dum da 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 da. Oh, hello, I'm Tom Bombadil. Like just random, like
Oh, he must be related to that Cedric guy earlier.
just random, like the Obi-Wan meme. Hello there. I'm Obi-Wan
General
Kenobi.
Kenobi.
General Kenobi. So I kind of have characters where they run like Xylox with Eliath and Sindrel, and they're on their way to Tytalis, to the Crystal City, and they run into one of Belgazar's, his youngest son, Sam. But like at first when they were going that way, I didn't think of anybody until like they're walking and Eliath is smelling his surroundings, and then there's a ping, ping, ping sound in town. I'm just like, oh, a craftsman. Perfect opportunity to just like have somebody who like Xylock knows, because Xylock knows everybody, literally. And I was just like, oh yeah. So they go and they meet. He just walks in. Oh, it's Sam. Been a long time. Ah, fight, right? Immediately. Just fight. And when they're done, Alive and Ezra, like, what the blazes are you doing? It's like, hey, this is Belgazar's youngest son. Every time we meet each other, we beat the living crap out of each other. That's wonderful. Like, what?
That is the most bro military buddy
It is, yeah.
greeting I think I've ever seen in my life. And by that point, I wasn't even surprised. I was like, yeah, this makes sense.
Exactly.
This makes
But
sense.
it's just random times like that. Or the very beginning of my book, even the part you've read, Ryan,
Mhm.
where they're the tournament and you've got the guys who the time of battle is upon us, but they're all marching forward, and that Trenor Delore guy shows up with the greatsword. He's just like, I want the blood sword. I'm a poor boy, and I like to worship devil. What you do, huh? Oh, that's unfortunate. You have a
You're not gonna.
long enjoy life in the void. All right. So, anyways, just random characters like that. They just come. Like, I don't know why I'm just going and all of a sudden I'm just like, it's not even in my head. This is how insane it is. They're going and all of a sudden character comes out and his name was Bobus Khan Grand Force the Fifth. And like you're what?
Yeah, I should clarify. If the character is of basically no importance and just somebody to serve a drink or bring a tray to a table, no, they don't have all this elaborate
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And his name was
background.
Bob. Move on. Like,
Yeah,
no one
it's
cares.
they don't a lot of times they don't even have names.
That works too. You don't need names. Like, like the waitress came over, right? Like Ezra's sitting with a military general. Waitress comes over. Anything else I can get for you, gentlemen? No. All right. Thank you. Have a good day. You don't even know what her name is. You're just like, who is this mystery waitress? Does she have something to do? Is she a drug dealer? Is she going to get one of these special pills? Is she going to become a villain? Like, nobody thinks that, right? I was just like,
No.
oh, it's a waitress. Like, she's a one-off.
Unless
Like,
and this is where we have to be careful as authors because if we bring attention to an object or a detail, people will think it's intentional because we didn't have to. So it becomes kind of like Chekhov's gun.
Yep.
And if you disappoint with Chekhov's gun, well, that's a point against your work. It's automatically not as good as it could have been.
Well, I think there's
you have
a caveat with that. If Chekhov's gun is being used not as a trick but as a misdirection, and it's used right, then it's okay. But if you put it there and you draw all this attention to it because you think it's a cool object and then it serves no purpose whatsoever,
Yeah,
then you're wasting that description on something that pulls you away from the story. And I think you're absolutely right with that.
it's like the first MacGuffin dagger in Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, we don't
It,
talk about Rise of Skywalker.
it's
Okay,
it's
because
well, it's a MacGuffin that leads you to another MacGuffin that's
I'm gonna come back and play Palpatine.
somehow
not even gonna
Palpatine
have a
had a
double.
granddaughter.
Anyways, you got to tell some of the saltmongers that like it's not Chekhov's gun that you're doing Chekhov's bazooka. And so with Chekhov's bazooka, you mention something and it doesn't get paid off until maybe the next book. They're like, that doesn't count. I'm like, it is. It's just a larger and more a long down the line version of Chekhov's gun. Sometimes there's short, medium, and long, right? It's like sprint, medium distance, marathon. So, like for example, Snape, his reveal of everything after Voldemort slit his throat, that was long
excellent.
marathon Chekhov's gun. That was Chekhov's nuclear sun bomb. Like that wasn't a gun,
Long-range
okay?
orbital assault missile.
That was like satellite by the firmament getting ready to like send like straight beam from like Star Trek where the Romulans would come in
Odin system.
and like it's like Odin's Mjolnir Romulan Star Trek gun times beam me up Scotty nuke bomb gun Chekhov's.
But
you say it all backwards.
But it was all set up from the beginning.
Correct.
Exactly.
Every step of that payoff was built starting in Sorcerer's Stone.
Which originally the title was supposed to be called Philosopher's Stone, and it got changed to Sorcerer's Stone. Interesting little bit of Harry Potter
I think
history
in
tidbit.
some translations it is still Philosopher's Stone.
Very well could be. Obviously Snape I think is one of the best written characters in
out of that
literature.
book. I will agree with that.
I think between my favorite book series, which is Lord of the Rings, Narnia, Harry Potter, for fantasy book series, obviously in Narnia, Caspian is probably the best written character.
Caspian is great.
He's fantastic. In Lord of the Rings, it's a mashup between Sam, Gandalf, and Aragorn as really well written characters.
I think Sam takes the cake.
Sam is really just honestly the hero. He's the MVP. And then in Harry Potter, Snape is probably the best written character. Um, Not because necessarily we get the most screen time with him, but because the most thought went into his
I think
character
that's a
creation.
fair statement.
So we can look at those things. So anybody who's listening and you're in the comments or whatnot, go ahead and drop what your favorite character that was created in literature or films. But this just goes to show how important good character creation is. Whether you're a pantser or a plotter, every writer's different. Like Brandon Sanderson is a heavy planner. He plans just about everything that he does. That's why his magic systems are so sophisticated. That's why his lore is so intertwined. But then you get somebody like George Martin who literally pantses almost everything that he writes. He's like a beginning and an end guy, and then he does. He
Stephen
even says
King.
it. Stephen King's
it.
another example. He pantses just about everything that he writes, which is why his books are just really lackluster to me, but I don't really like horror. So
I'm not a huge horror fan either.
some people are like, well, the Dark Tower. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, honestly, Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers. How about that?
Yeah, we got 2 towers. We got 2
So,
of them.
and the
And a
towers are
king
both
that
dark.
returns.
Yeah. And both of those towers are dark. So I don't need Stephen King's Dark Tower.
When our wizards die, they come back to life.
And I think
when
I was gonna say, just to touch on that, like I'm not a Stephen King fan either, but I think that's one of the things that goes to each author has their own strengths, where his storytelling is very, very good, and that's what people come for. But
Yeah.
the writing is hard to read, and I think that's where like a lot of the adaptations in the movie for him was where a lot of his success came, and then pushed to the books. And there are also hardcore Stephen King fans that read the books too and will swear by it, but a vast majority of people who read it don't enjoy it, but they do enjoy the stories. So
literally, living room, red window curtains, nothing to do with red window curtains, but we're going to talk about them for 10 pages. Like, that's Stephen King. He is like, you want to talk about using Chekhov's gun in the worst possible way?
Yeah.
That's King for you. You want to talk about being well known for being a good horror writer? Sure, he is. He's written some good horror books. I don't read horror, but obviously he's done something with that. And now at this point in time, it's just his name that gets him most of his. He's got his readers, he's got his community. Anybody else who's going to pick up one of those books is just going to be, oh, it's Stephen King, so I'm going to get this book because it must be good because it's Stephen King. And then they come find out that they can't stand him, just like Rebecca Yarros and like Sarah J. Maas and all this other garbage that's considered fantasy, but all it is just like book versions of pornos. So I mean, I don't really know, but
what Stephen excels at is atmosphere.
Yep.
He can create atmosphere with just a few sentences. And credit where it's due, that takes an insane amount of skill. Probably more skill than I'll ever have. I think personally, The Shining and Pet Cemetery, I think are his best works. The movies, I think, help prop those books up a lot.
Talk to him. He hates the movies. He hates any movie that's made off of his books because he
doesn't hate the royalty check.
Oh, I'm sure. You like Ready
so
Player
weird.
One. They're talking about The Shining, where the characters are going, and they're like, it's based off of the book by Stephen King, who hated the movie. It's just like there. I think maybe there's like authors who do hate the movie versions of their created works, but I think that's another reason why it's so important to make sure whoever is going to be creating said work based off of your work, that you're in an interpersonal working relationship with those people and you're getting to see what the final end result was going to be, just like, George Lucas giving away Lucasfilm to Disney destroyed the Star Wars movies because their stories are no longer about stories and lore, it's about paychecks. So
in all fairness, George Lucas was doing a pretty okay job of doing that himself.
I mean, yeah, that's fair, but still, I mean, you look at the sequel movies and like people who made jokes about the prequels, like we all laugh at that, but until the sequels came out, and then we're like, holy crap, I wish George was back. His bad dialogue about
Bring me
hating
George,
sand might have
please.
been like, I hate sand. Bring me George. I'll take I hate sand. I'll
Yeah.
take floating peaches. I'll take any of that stuff. I'll take Darth Vader go, no, over all the garbage that has come since. And that's the thing. You look at these character creation, it goes right back to character creation. And you look at some of these like random characters who have been created. Like, do you think when George Lucas wrote Star Wars that scene in Empire where the bounty hunters are all standing up there, you had Bosk, you had Boba Fett, you had some other alien race bounty hunter, and it's Darth Vader, giving orders, find Han Solo, bring me him for carbonite, blah, blah, blah. Do you think at that point in time there were any plans for Boba Fett to be, this big character, to get a show, to be like this whole Mandalorian, like, lineage lore, the stuff with Jango Fett and the prequels? Do you think any of that was ever, do you think he even thought about that when Boba was standing there, right? I'm guessing
I'm gonna say maybe a little bit. There's a
maybe,
little bit, just enough to inform the character's actions.
perhaps. In
But
my brain, well,
an entire spin-off series at that point, probably not when he's writing that book because he's focused there, but knowing maybe that the Mandalorian race is a group of people that live a certain way, yes, I could see that. And then maybe he was like, oh, someday down the line I want to write about this character that you see, especially since that character did play a role later. But yeah, I agree with you there. I don't think he had it to the extent of what it is now planned out at that point. Absolutely not.
I don't think he wrote books. I think he wrote the scripts for the movies. He came up with the characters and the ideas, but I don't think he actually wrote any books per se. I think the Star Wars books came from a lot of authors who were like, hey, George, can I write in the Star Wars universe? Do I have your permission to create these characters? And it'd be like, yes. But Ryan, if you want to Google that and look that up, I don't think
Yeah,
George Lucas actually
I thought they were
wrote any
books
books.
first.
I don't think
No.
that he did. But usually when something like that happens, there is a framework in which you must work under. A lot of the Warhammer books fall under that kind of category.
1977 was Star Wars. It wasn't even called A New Hope at that time. It was just Star Wars. But um, I because there's a different process. There's writing a book and then making a book a movie, and then there's just writing screenplay and script for a movie. And I think that's what George did, because that's what he went to, like, script. He went to like college
Yeah.
for writing scripts and things like that,
It
and
was a
working in
movie
that type of
first.
field. Yeah, that's what I
And
thought.
then-
He also did literally Campbell's A Hero's Journey.
Yep.
Literally almost verbatim.
So that's kind of my point. I don't think when we saw Boba Fett standing there on Bespin that we were like, oh yeah, we're gonna do Jango Fett in the prequels, and Boba's gonna be Jango's son, and Jango was, what they cloned the clone army off of, and all this stuff with Sifo Dyas and everything. I don't think any of that was even thought out. George didn't strike me as the big picture guy. His ex-wife did, however. She helped him with a lot of that, like the integral, like, plan, like boom, 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 dot your T's, cross your cross your T's, dot your I's.
I was gonna
That
let it slide.
was
I
all
was gonna let it
relative.
slide.
be like me, like calling worm tongue, worm tongue instead of wormtail, like,
Yeah.
just silly. Anyways, yeah,
I have a question. Since we kind of
I
talked
like
about
questions.
some of our favorite characters, I would like you guys to pick one of your favorite characters and tell us why they were a very good character and what makes them such a strong character. And I can go first if you guys want to think about it, or if you have one, go ahead.
Give me a second.
Okay. Do you have one, Nathan, or you want me to go ahead?
You go ahead.
Okay. So we've talked about it before on the podcast, but the Dragonlance Chronicles, one of my favorite series. I'm going back and re-listening to all the books right now, but one of my favorite characters is Tanis Half-Elven. And the way he's created in these books is he's a half-elf, so he's half human, half elf, but he's accepted by neither world. So he grows a beard to cover up his elven features so he can fit in with the human world a little bit better. But if they see his ears, they push him away. So he has this very loner mentality because of who he is and where he comes from, that forces him to find a home with his traveling companions, D&D style party that goes off on adventures. And that's where his true family is, where he's accepted as a character. And as he grows as a character throughout the book series, he steps into the leadership role that he doesn't necessarily want, but is best suited to lead the party. He's the most level-minded of the group. He doesn't act rashly, but he accepts even the questionable people's judgment and takes it into account. And he grows through all that into the leader that he's meant to be the whole time. And he has to come to terms with accepting that. But just the way that character is written, there's so many levels that go deep, and you see that growth in every book. So like in each book, he grows as a character, but over the entire series, you see him grow even further than just that. So he's one of those ones that sticks out to me, where there are those physical details where he grows the beard to cover up his features. So you get a little bit more detail with the character, but it's still loosely described. You don't have like exact detail beyond that of the character outside of like cover art, things like that. But like, I think that's one of the leading ones for me that stands out in the book world.
What's your favorite book out of the whole series?
Probably Autumn Twilight, but I'm still going back through them. So, I mean, there could be other ones that I'm like, oh
And
man, I forgot about that. But
Caleb, did you want to go next, or you want me to go?
Keep going. I'm trying to narrow this list down, buddy.
there's probably a lot of them. Yeah.
It doesn't, and we can talk. We can obviously have another episode where we
Sure.
talk about character creation again. It's no biggie. We have to create one for a D&D campaign, anyways. We're building that. Stay tuned, listeners. So just think of it as one of your favorite characters from character creation. It
Yeah,
doesn't have
yeah.
to
I'm
be
just
your favorite.
but I'm
Um,
trying. If I have to pick one to talk about right now, which one is it? Is what
yeah, for me specifically, I
It
was
could
going
be.
to be cliche and say one of my own characters, but I'm not going to be that type of person. Um, that's just silly. But my favorite character, just character creation wise, across, I'm gonna have to go with da ba da ba da ba 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 da ba
So
ba
while you're
ba ba da ba
thinking,
ba. Yeah.
there that's the beauty of this, is like we talk a lot about books and movies, but even anime has very creative characters that go really far. Video games, like a lot of people think Master Chief is one of the best video game characters,
Oh,
which
can
is,
we use video games and
you
anime?
can use whatever media you want, because that's the beauty of when you're writing, it translates to all these media, scripts, movies, comic books. All those things still have character development. I mean, we had a whole episode on how Superman sucks because there's no character development with that character for us personally. Now, Caleb might disagree, and we might have to
well,
come
no,
back to that subject. But
I disagree. On principle, I disagree because I don't think the character sucks. I think what the writers have done with the character is abysmal. Because Superman he's a paragon character, so you can't. Uh, the way you work with a paragon is you put him in situations that challenge his morality, or that he just can't fix, and how he responds to that without compromising the virtue. But I'll yeah.
It's an season 2 episode. It's a fantastic episode. You'll have to watch it.
Yeah.
But
Sorry,
anyways,
get my blood pressure up.
it was season 2, right,
Yeah.
Ryan?
I think it comes
Yeah.
out the
Okay.
season 2.
One of my favorite written characters across all forms of media is John, Spartan 117, Master Chief, hands down. And it's not because Ryan mentioned it. It's because like I love the old school Halo games, Combat Evolved, Halo 2, Halo Reach. But you can watch the animated show where they kind of show John going through the Spartan program with Dr. Halsey and how they go through the whole selection process and what these Spartans are literally, created to do. They're space marines. They're meant to go out, slay aliens and protect, the united forces of people in the Navy, and then discovering the Halo rings and everything. But when it comes to unique stories, like Master Chief has one. And it's not like necessarily the most creative, but I think it's the basicness of who he is as a character, is that you're imagining yourself as him and then following along as he does all these things throughout the games that makes Master Chief so legendary. And that you know that he was created as the leader of the Spartan Force. And just, he doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. It's just like, John, I've noticed enemy forces. I need a weapon. Right away, Master Chief. That right there is our universe. And that's just it. Like, they come up, Master Chief, we've got an issue. What is it? The Covenant, they've surrounded it. What are we going to do?
Give me a gun.
Give me a weapon. Like, literally, that's just it, man. And you don't see his face until Paramount completely just took a giant dump and defiled everything that Halo is. And like, worse than what they did with Tolkien's grave with the Rings of Power. Like, they just straight up were like, you know what? We're going to create a show that should basically be called Mass Effect. And we're going to have John take his helmet off. And the first episode, and I really just wanted to grab the brain of the creator of that show and
Spaghetti.
anyways, yeah, just yell, just blah blah blah. I'll leave my other favorite character. My ever favorite character is Azuka Midoriya from My Hero Academia, but I'll leave that one for later because we're running low on time. So Caleb, go ahead.
My favorite is one of my characters. You do not understand how hard it was for me not to just go back to fanboying over Samwise Gamgee, but I'm not, because
You can though.
Yeah.
I can, and the problem is I can for hours. I could write an
That's
entire
fair.
soliloquy of how I think Sam is, one of the 3 critical heroes of Middle Earth.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, hands down.
But I think we have a book, we have a game, so I think I'm going to pick one from a movie. And this is probably again going to be another cliche one. And I'm having problems picking between the two, so I'll mention them both briefly. But starting with and they got a lot of things wrong, but I think the MCU got Captain America pretty dead on, at least
Mhm.
in the first few movies. He's again one of these Paragon type characters, but he starts off with this naivety of blindly trusting the authority, and we see him through the first Avenger make that ultimate sacrifice for God and country and family, and he never gets that dance with Peggy.
Rip.
Yeah, poor guy. And then we see him in first Avenger, in Avengers. And hang on, the authority is not being honest with me. And then you see him start to deviate, not compromising his morals, not compromising that at all. In fact, he's got very little character growth as far as morality goes. And I would argue he's got very little character growth at all, except for knowing who and who not to trust. So which by the way is a great thematic
Mhm.
theme song for Cap. It's a war march, which is We're steeped in Americana, but I'm digressing. But we see him starting to sneak around and investigate the helicarrier, and he confronts the director of Shield with a gun based off of the technology the Red Skull was studying.
Can I
And it's like,
can
hey,
I
what?
say
Go ahead, go
that's
ahead.
that's my favorite part is Fury telling Cap, a lot of things have changed since you've been under the ice. I doubt I'd be surprised. $20 says you're wrong. Later, that Cap just hands the $20 to Fury because of the flying boat. Anyways,
But
continue.
yeah, but then we get to Civil War
Ooh, that's a sad movie. Depressing.
because it takes this world that this beautiful cinnamon roll of a soul Steven Rogers believed in and hung it in a balance, which this is how you deal with a Paragon character. You hang it in a balance with someone that he loves the most. And you have to find a way to balance these two things. Do I compromise myself? Do I save my friend? Or can I do it all? Spider-Man gets put in this position a lot. At least in the comic books. They do it a few in the movies. The other one is Iron Man. Starts off as this cocky, arrogant billionaire. Billionaire. I did it again.
Billionaire,
Playboy, philanthropist. That's the line. Say the line, Bart. That's the line. But you incrementally, you see him learn from past mistakes. In Avengers, he becomes a team player. In Iron Man 2, he learns to deal with his vices. Iron Man 3, he realizes that he is not just a man in a suit. And if you look, and this is one of my favorite things in I believe it is Spider-Man Homecoming. You see Peter Parker in the Iron Spider fly too high, lose control, crash to the ground, freezing to death. That suit had location. That suit had warmers. That suit had airbag, a full arrest system. Because at one point
it wasn't Homecoming. They hadn't had Infinity War at that point. He had the suit that Stark gave him from Civil War, and he had his. No, it wasn't Civil War. He got that brand new kind of where the eyeballs went up and down and kind of just nice
that's
material.
Right. You're right.
Versus his like hoodlum skater mask thing that he put on with his own looking backpack and everything that he used against Michael Keaton's Vulture at the end. Because Stark
you are
100% that suit, and then Iron Spider
then made Iron Spider.
In Infinity War was the first time you ever saw that.
And
then Far From Home.
You're correct.
So, yeah.
You're correct. But still, that suit had everything because he watched his best friend fall to the sky and barely be able to walk again. He nearly froze to death twice. And in Iron Man 3, nobody knew where he was. Piper thought he was dead. So he put a tracker in there.
Oh, and poor Happy.
Oh, poor Happy.
Just saying, man. Like, dude almost got nuked. Like, and also, literally, they worst version of the Mandarin, but I digress. Anyways, continue.
Oh, no, 100%. 100%. I hate what they did to the Mandarin. But the fact of the matter is, you see over a course of several movies, these characters grow and adapt and come to terms with everything they are, and more importantly, everything they are not. And I just think that they did great with specifically those two characters.
That's why most of us are as pissed off as we are today, because it used to be that good, and now it's just you don't feel that anymore. There is no more of that beautiful storytelling. It's
part
just
of that. The wrap up to Endgame, where both of them, Tony Stark made the ultimate, the sacrifice play, and
spoiler alert.
Well, I mean, it's how old now? 15 years, 10 years. It's up there, but
5 years, yeah.
5 years. No, I just know it was older, but Tony Stark makes the sacrifice play, and Cap America, he wields Mjolnir. So everything special about Steven Rogers did not come out of a bottle. And Iron Man, Tony Stark was not as arrogant and conceited. It was more or less a character flaw, a shield to hide himself from from his past mistakes, and they
I mean,
overcame those obstacles.
full circle from Ultron,
Yeah,
where they were around the table, everybody was trying to lift Mjolnir, and Thor was just sitting there, just like no. And then Cap came over, and then Thor's eyes are just like opened wide as Cap
You
almost
wanna-
got. He's just like, and then he's just like, oh no, nothing.
you wanna know a headcanon I have, and I think it's probably accurate.
Yeah, just let me. My favorite part was in Endgame where Thor was just like, I knew
I
it.
knew it. I knew it. I think Steven could have picked it up in that moment, but he stopped
No.
himself.
He wasn't worthy yet.
I could see either way, but
I could, yes, but
So-
I don't think so.
I could make the argument. But I just like to think.
Go
that,
ahead.
Go ahead,
I'm gonna
Ryan.
give it.
let's play off that a little bit because I want to add to your Captain America. I agree that there wasn't a lot of growth morally because his morals stayed the same, and that was what was
Yes.
truly good about that character. However,
Yes.
his loyalties and where he needed to place those
Yeah.
morals is
Yes,
where there was
that's-
significant growth because he
That's a good
understood
way.
he was being played and he needed to change what was truly needed to be protected wasn't
Yes.
America the entity, it was America the people. And
The
right now,
ideal.
the worst enemy of the people was the governments and the secrets at that point. So he had to shift it. And you even see that at the end of Endgame with he makes the selfish play for himself. He goes back in time, he
Finally.
places everything, and he makes that selfish play
Finally.
for himself. I've given everything to this world, to this country. It's my turn. And he
He
makes that
finally gets the
reverse growth of Iron Man, where it's all about coming to terms of making that sacrifice finally, whereas Captain America's soul sacrificed the whole time and finally makes that selfish play. But to go to picking up the hammer, he may have not been worthy because he was in that transition of understanding his morals being misplaced. But I do also credit it could have been he didn't want Thor to feel like there was someone who could challenge him for that hammer's worthiness and chose not to pick it up. I could see him making that decision the way
and
you're
that
saying.
could also make him unworthy of wielding Mjolnir.
True.
Maybe part of
Second-guessing
being
himself.
worthy. Yes.
Mhm.
Maybe part of being worthy is
I
that
don't- No, because I don't think that would have even been a thing between Cap and Thor. Because at that point in time, Thor was still like Earth dumb, is what I like to call him. He was Earth dumb. He didn't understand humor. He didn't understand speaking Earthling. He was still very Asgardian at that point in time, right? Pun intended. Cap was a very honorable type of person.
Yes.
And the relationship between him and Thor was good. Like, there was never any bad blood. And I feel like Cap would have been honest with Thor about something like that. And Cap never once like looked around to anybody else. He just straight up looked down and was trying to lift it. And he didn't even like eyeball Thor. He didn't like stop or pause or anything. It's just like lift. Same thing in Thor 1 where Loki tried to lift Mjolnir and couldn't, or anybody else who's tried to and they couldn't. It's this thing that Odin put on there. He's like, whoever shall be worthy shall possess the power of Thor. So at that point in time, and also here's the thing, right? As Cap goes as being worthy, I think there's a lot with the Asgardian lore, but it also has to do with what's weighing on your heart, I believe. So if Cap was mistrusting of the government, if Cap did not trust necessarily Tony, maybe with some secrets, or Banner,
I think that's what did it.
Or anybody, if he was having trouble trusting people, that would lead to him not being worthy. Because if you can't trust your friends and your allies, what are you going to do to them with such power if you can't trust them? And that goes to prove in Civil War, where you saw Zemo, they're going to prove a human nemesis can pit people against each other. And that goes to show you how dangerous it can end up being. And the mistrust just continued to build. Even from day one, where Cap and Tony first met each other, they were already barking at each other. And then Ultron came along, and Cap was really pissed at Tony because he's like, you guys seriously just made this AI crap with Jarvis? You didn't learn your lesson? Like, and Thor was kind of the same thing. He's like, you're messing with things that you have no business messing with. You didn't listen your lesson from Loki messing with the Tesseract, and now you're using the Tesseract to mess with Jarvis and AI. And Cap was the same crap. He was mistrusting of all that science research crap with Tony. I think there was still a part of that rested. He still, even up to the point in Civil War, he didn't trust Natasha. He still didn't trust her. Cap and Natasha, they were supposed to be really close, and he didn't trust her because of all the stuff from Cap 2, from Captain America 2 with Bucky. His just mistrust of everything. So I think that was the thing for Cap. All those years was the mistrust in his heart, his the unknowing, the unsureness in not being able to necessarily forgive. That's what was on his heart. So when everything went down with Civil War and then Infinity War, Cap wanted to burn those bridges. He wanted to come back together. But Tony was being the one. Exactly. And so when Endgame came along, it was finally like there was no like mistrust or anything. He's just like, you're my brother. I trust you. Do you trust me? It's like, yeah, I do. It's like, okay.
And you're probably right. It's just fun to think about.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And
this is something we're going to have some other episodes where we'll deep dive into some of this stuff because
I believe you're exactly correct on why Mjolnir would have doubted his worth, because he did specifically mistrust Tony at this point. And because and credit where it's
not just Tony, everybody.
But Tony is the one that the movie focuses on.
Correct, yeah.
But everything he knew at this point has been a lie. Ever since they brought him out of the ice, everything has been wrong. So who's to say these people aren't plants? Who's to say they aren't trying to control me? True. And I can completely understand that.
Well, we will get to that on another day.
I think we need to cut this off because we can do this all night.
We could keep going and going and going.
Ryan, we're at an hour 20.
Do you have any last speaks, Ryan?
One thing to play off of your Master Chief, and I think that's a good example of a character can be, not to downplay him, but simple. It doesn't have to be overly complex and can still be very impactful. And that reminds me of King Leonidas in the 300. That character has very little growth, but his sole purpose throughout that entire movie is, this is my duty. I will die for my duty. I will complete this task, no matter what it costs me, because my job is to protect my people. And that holds true in every action he completes as that character throughout the movie until his death, where he still fulfills that role. So like a character can be very simple and one-dimensional and still incredibly impactful as it fits the story. So that's my kind of closing thought.
I don't think he's one-dimensional. I think he's just more subdued.
Yeah, so not overly complicated, I guess, is what I want to get. So one-dimensional is harsh, but yes.
Yeah.
So
I understand
right along with these one-dimensional heroes as realistic dialogue, realistic choreography, and realistic Hayden Christensen acting. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for another episode of the War of Nerds. This is the finale episode, and we hope you enjoyed talking about character creation and going a little bit into the ramblings of some characters that we really like, and we'll get more into the character process and lore and theory and things like that in some other episodes. But until then, I have been the funky fantasy man, Nathan Helm.
I'm Caleb Myers. I'm almost writing a book.
And I'm Ryan Morgan, also known as Stratoceros. I have written a book.
And we love you guys. We appreciate you for sticking with us. And as always, for old time's sake, funky fantasy, oh the god, Stratoceros, it's the War of Nerds.
See ya.
See y'all next time.
Season 3, baby.